Rome conquers Britain, the humiliation that ignited an empire. A thick morning fog rolled across the marshes of eastern Britain. The only sounds were the cries of distant ravens and the slow movement of horses through wet grass. Then, the earth began to tremble. At first, it was almost imperceptible. A faint vibration beneath the feet. Moments later, it became impossible to ignore. Thousands of iron-shod sandals struck the ground in perfect rhythm. The sound grew louder. Steady. Relentless. Unstoppable. Out of the mist emerged lines of soldiers unlike anything Britain had ever seen. Polished helmets reflected the pale morning light. Rectangular shields locked together into walls of crimson. Golden eagles rose above the ranks, glimmering against the grey sky. Behind them came cavalry, engineers, siege machines, wagons loaded with supplies, and officers shouting commands in Latin. The Roman Empire had arrived. For the tribes of Britain, this was more than another foreign invasion. It was the arrival of a civilization that believed no frontier was beyond its reach. Within a generation, their world would change forever. Villages would become Roman towns. Ancient forests would be cut apart by military roads. Temples dedicated to Celtic gods would stand beside shrines to Jupiter. Some tribes would embrace the newcomers. Others would resist until the very end. Among those watching Rome tighten its grip on Britain was a young noblewoman from the Iceni tribe. No one knew her name would one day terrify the Roman Empire itself. She would command an army larger than many Roman legions. She would burn cities to the ground. She would come closer than anyone imagined to driving Rome from Britain forever. Her name was Boudicca. But before she became a queen, before she became a legend, she was simply a wife, a mother, and a woman whose entire world was about to be destroyed. This is the story of the revolt of Boudicca. Nearly a century after the death of Julius Caesar, the Roman Empire had become the most powerful state on earth. Its borders stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the deserts of Syria. Merchant ships crossed the Mediterranean carrying grain from Egypt, olive oil from Hispania, marble from Greece, spices from Arabia, and silk from lands far beyond Rome's eastern frontier. Roman roads connected provinces separated by thousands of kilometers. Aqueducts supplied enormous cities with fresh water. Legions guarded borders from the scorching sands of North Africa to the cold forests along the Rhine. To many Romans, expansion seemed almost inevitable. If another land existed beyond the frontier, it would eventually become Roman. Only one large island still resisted complete conquest: Britain. For generations, Britain had remained mysterious in Roman imagination. Ancient writers described it as a distant land of thick forests, rolling hills, endless rain, and fierce warriors painted in blue dye. Some stories exaggerated wildly. Others were surprisingly accurate. The island was home to dozens of Celtic tribes, each ruled by its own kings or queens. Some were allies. Many were rivals. Few thought of themselves as belonging to one nation. That division would later become one of Rome's greatest advantages. Britain possessed valuable resources: tin, lead, silver, iron, excellent farmland. Thriving trade routes connected the island to continental Europe long before Roman soldiers ever arrived. Powerful hill forts crowned ridges across the countryside. Sacred groves echoed with religious ceremonies led by druids. Families lived in roundhouses built from timber, clay, and thatched roofs. Children learned hunting, farming, and tribal traditions from an early age. Life followed the rhythm of the seasons. Despite Roman descriptions of Britain as primitive, archaeology reveals a sophisticated society with skilled metalworkers, active trade, and complex political relationships. It was different from Rome. Not inferior. Rome had attempted to reach Britain before. In 55 and 54 BC, Julius Caesar crossed the English Channel during his Gallic campaigns. His expeditions demonstrated Roman military power but achieved little permanent control. After Caesar departed, Britain remained independent for nearly another 100 years. Everything changed in AD 43. The new emperor, Claudius, needed a military victory to strengthen his legitimacy. Britain offered the perfect opportunity. For Roman legions crossed the Channel supported by thousands of auxiliary troops. Disciplined, organized, experienced. The invasion quickly overwhelmed many southern tribes. One after another, local rulers accepted Roman authority. Some resisted. Others realized cooperation offered better chances of survival. Within only a few years, southeastern Britain had become part of the Roman Empire. But conquering land and controlling it were two very different things. Among the tribes living in eastern Britain were the Iceni. Their territory stretched across what is now Norfolk, a landscape of fertile fields, rivers, wetlands, and scattered woodlands. Unlike many neighboring peoples, the Iceni initially chose cooperation over confrontation. Rome often preferred such arrangements. Rather than occupying every territory directly, imperial officials allowed certain tribes to govern themselves as client kingdoms. These rulers retained limited independence while recognizing Roman supremacy. They paid tribute, supported Roman military operations, maintained order within their lands. For both sides, it appeared a practical compromise. The king of the Iceni was a man named Prasutagus. Little is known about his early life. Ancient sources portray him as cautious rather than reckless. He understood the overwhelming strength of Rome. Instead of leading his people into hopeless war, he sought stability. His wife was Boudicca. History tells us frustratingly little about Boudicca before the revolt. Almost everything we know comes from Roman historians writing years after her death. Even so, certain details stand out. She was described as unusually tall. Her long reddish-brown hair reportedly fell below her waist. She possessed a commanding presence capable of inspiring thousands. Ancient historian Cassius Dio wrote that her voice carried extraordinary authority. Whether every physical description is perfectly accurate remains uncertain. Roman authors sometimes emphasize dramatic features to make historical figures more memorable. Yet both major ancient sources agree on something important. Boudicca possessed remarkable charisma. People followed her willingly. That quality cannot be manufactured. It reveals itself only in moments of crisis. Life under Roman influence brought both opportunity and tension. Roman merchants established trading posts. Imported pottery, wine, olive oil, jewelry, and luxury goods became increasingly common. Some tribal elites adopted Roman clothing. Others learned Latin. Children from influential families occasionally received Roman-style education. Roads improved communication. Markets expanded. Trade flourished. Yet beneath these visible benefits simmered growing resentment. Roman taxes increased steadily. Imperial officials often treated local leaders with open arrogance. Land disputes became common. Veterans settling in Britain expected the best farmland. Some Roman soldiers abused their authority. Many Britons began wondering whether cooperation had slowly become submission. The balance grew increasingly fragile. Then came the event that changed everything. Sometime around AD 60, King Prasutagus died. Knowing the uncertainty surrounding succession, he attempted an unusual solution. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, Prasutagus left his kingdom jointly to his two daughters and the Roman Emperor Nero, hoping that such an arrangement would protect both his family and his people. It was a diplomatic gamble. One final attempt to preserve peace. Instead, it invited disaster. Roman law did not recognize such an inheritance. Imperial officials saw the situation differently. Why respect the wishes of a dead client king, when his lands could simply become Roman property? Almost immediately, Roman administrators seized control. Estates were confiscated. Property was taken. Leading nobles lost their wealth. Families who had remained loyal to Rome suddenly found themselves treated as conquered enemies. Then, the violence became personal. According to Tacitus, Roman officials publicly flogged Boudicca. Her daughters were assaulted. The incident shocked not only the Iceni but neighboring tribes as well. Some historians debate the precise details because our surviving accounts come exclusively from Roman writers, but there is broad agreement that severe abuses committed by Roman authorities became the immediate catalyst for the uprising. For Celtic society, the humiliation of a queen was not merely an insult to one family. It dishonored an entire people. Word spread with astonishing speed. From village to village. From forest to forest. From one tribal council to another. Every retelling fueled greater anger. What had begun as political injustice became something far more dangerous. A call for vengeance. Imagine the scene. The queen stands before her people. Her kingdom stolen. Her family destroyed. The promises Rome once made reduced to ashes. Around her gather warriors carrying long spears and oval shields. Farmers. Hunters. Blacksmiths. Fathers. Sons. Old rivals who suddenly discover they share a common enemy. For years, Rome had relied on the divisions between Britain's tribes. Now, those divisions were beginning to disappear. One by one, leaders pledged their support. The Trinovants joined first. Others soon followed. The gathering army grew larger with each passing day. Roman officials noticed unusual movements. Messengers failed to return. Entire villages appeared abandoned. Something was happening beyond the frontier roads. But no one yet understood its true scale. Not even the governor of Britain. Far to the west, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus was leading a campaign against the Druids on the island of Mona. While Rome celebrated another victory, a storm was gathering behind it. And when that storm finally broke, 3 Roman cities would burn. Tens of thousands would die. And for one terrifying moment, the Roman Empire would come closer than ever before to losing Britain. The Queen calls for war, the first city burns. The Roman governor had no idea what was coming. Far to the west, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus believed he was finishing one of the most important campaigns in Roman Britain. His objective was the island of Mona, known today as Anglesey. To the Romans, it was far more than a remote island. It was the spiritual heart of Celtic resistance. For years, Roman commanders had viewed the Druids as a dangerous force capable of inspiring tribes to unite against imperial rule. While modern historians debate the full extent of their political influence, ancient Roman writers consistently portray Mona as an important religious center. If the island fell, Britain, it seemed, would finally be secure. Or so the governor believed. History had other plans. As Roman soldiers prepared boats for the crossing to Mona, something extraordinary was happening nearly 200 miles away. Across the lands of the Iceni, fires began appearing on distant hilltops. One after another. Then another. To outsiders, they looked like ordinary signal fires. To the tribes of Britain, they carried a message that had not echoed across the island for generations. War. Messengers rode day and night through forests, marshes, and narrow valleys. War horns sounded in hidden settlements. Blacksmiths abandoned peaceful work and forged spearheads instead of farming tools. Women gathered food and supplies. Young boys carried arrows. Older men sharpened swords that had not left their homes in years. Entire villages transformed almost overnight. The rebellion was no longer an idea. It had become an army. At its center stood Boudicca. Ancient writers describe her traveling in a war chariot, moving from tribe to tribe as thousands gathered to hear her speak. No transcript of her words survives. The speeches recorded by Roman historians were almost certainly literary reconstructions rather than exact quotations. Even so, they reveal how later generations understood her message. She did not promise wealth. She did not promise glory. She promised freedom. She reminded her listeners of stolen lands, of heavy taxes, of Roman arrogance, of sacred places destroyed, and of the humiliation inflicted upon her and her daughters. For many warriors standing before her, that was enough. The tribes had followed kings before. Now, they followed a queen. The speed of the uprising astonished everyone. The Trinovans, longtime enemies of Roman rule, joined almost immediately. Soon afterward, smaller neighboring tribes pledged warriors of their own. Each arrival strengthened the rebellion. Farmers became soldiers. Hunters became scouts. Horse breeders supplied cavalry. Blacksmiths worked without sleep. Some estimates from ancient sources claim Boudicca eventually commanded more than 100,000 followers. Modern historians generally believe those figures were exaggerated, a common practice in ancient histories, but there is little doubt that her army vastly outnumbered the Roman forces immediately available in southeastern Britain. It was the largest native uprising Rome had yet faced on the island. Meanwhile, Roman confidence remained dangerously high. Many officials dismissed the unrest as another local disturbance. They had seen tribal revolts before. Most ended quickly. A few harsh punishments. A handful of executions. The problem disappeared. But this rebellion was different. It was no longer about one tribe. It had become a movement. And movements are far more difficult to crush. The first target was obvious. Camulodunum. Modern Colchester. The city symbolized everything many Britons hated about Roman rule. It had once belonged to the Trinovans. Now it was a Roman colony reserved largely for retired legionaries. Magnificent stone buildings dominated the skyline. Roman temples rose above the surrounding countryside. The largest of them, dedicated to the deified Emperor Claudius, reminded every visitor exactly who controlled Britain. To Roman veterans, the city represented civilization. To many local tribes, it represented occupation. Warnings reached the colony. Some local leaders reported unusual tribal gatherings. Others claimed large numbers of armed warriors had been seen moving through nearby forests. The colonists laughed. Their walls remained unfinished. Many believed no serious threat existed. After all, who would dare attack Rome? Even when requests for military reinforcements were sent, little arrived. The provincial administration underestimated the danger. It would become one of the greatest mistakes in Roman Britain's history. Then, the horizon darkened. Not with storm clouds. With people. From every direction, warriors emerged across the fields surrounding Camulodunum. Thousands. Then thousands more. Their shields reflected the afternoon sunlight. War horns echoed across the countryside. Women marched beside men. Entire families followed the army. Some brought wagons carrying supplies. Others carried little more than determination. The rebellion had become impossible to ignore. Inside the city, panic spread rapidly. Veterans rushed to collect weapons. Citizens barricaded streets. Priests gathered inside the great temple of Claudius, believing its thick stone walls would protect them. Messengers desperately rode south seeking help. Only one nearby military force attempted to respond. The 9th Legion, commanded by Quintus Petilius Cerealis, hurried toward Camulodunum. But they arrived too late. Boudicca moved faster. The assault began before dawn. Unlike Roman armies, the rebels possessed few siege engines. They did not need them. Camulodunum's defenses were incomplete. Thousands of attackers surged toward the settlement simultaneously. Wooden buildings caught fire almost immediately. Smoke filled the streets. The defenders quickly realized they could not hold the outer districts. One neighborhood after another disappeared beneath flames. Roman veterans fought desperately, forming shield walls at key intersections. Some managed to delay the attackers. Most were overwhelmed. Within hours, the city was collapsing. Roofs caved in beneath the fire. Market stalls disappeared beneath smoke. Statues crashed from their pedestals. The magnificent temple of Claudius became the final refuge for surviving Romans. Hundreds crowded inside. The massive stone building appeared almost impossible to capture. For 2 days, they resisted. Outside, Boudicca's warriors surrounded the temple. Unable to break through immediately, they piled timber against its walls. Fire spread upward. Smoke poured through every opening. Eventually, the defenders could no longer continue. When the temple finally fell, organized resistance inside Camulodunum ended. The city was effectively destroyed. Archaeologists excavating modern Colchester have uncovered a thick layer of ash dating to this period, silent evidence of the devastation described by ancient historians. Nearly 2,000 years later, the burned earth still tells the story. News of the catastrophe spread with astonishing speed. The 9th Legion, racing to relieve the city, suddenly found itself confronting a far larger enemy than expected. Its commander pressed forward anyway. Perhaps he hoped surprise would compensate for numbers. Instead, he rode directly into disaster. Boudicca's warriors overwhelmed the advancing force. The Roman infantry suffered devastating losses. Only the cavalry escaped. For one terrifying moment, an entire Roman legion had nearly been destroyed. Across Britain, confidence in Roman invincibility began to crumble. When word finally reached Suetonius Paulinus in the west, he understood immediately. This was no ordinary revolt. Britain itself was slipping from Rome's grasp. The governor abandoned further operations on Mona without hesitation. Every available soldier was ordered east. Messengers rode day and night. Garrisons were stripped of troops. Roads filled with exhausted legionaries marching as fast as humanly possible. But Britain was a vast province. Distances that seemed manageable on a map became brutal realities on foot. Every hour mattered. And every hour allowed Boudicca to grow stronger. Victorious at Camulodunum, the queen addressed her followers once again. Behind her, smoke still rose above the ruins of the Roman colony. Before her stood an army intoxicated by victory. For the first time, they had defeated Rome in open rebellion. Many now believed something once considered impossible. Perhaps the empire could actually be driven from Britain. Perhaps every Roman settlement could burn. Perhaps freedom was no longer a dream. It was within reach. Boudicca knew exactly where to strike next. The greatest commercial center in Roman Britain. A young city growing richer every year. A place filled with merchants, officials, warehouses, and opportunity. Its name was Londinium. Modern London. Within days, its streets would become an inferno. And the Roman governor would face the most difficult decision of his life. Rome burns, the fall of Londinium. The roads leading to Londinium had never been busier. Merchants from Gaul guided wagons loaded with wine, olive oil, glassware, and fine pottery. Local Britons brought wool, grain, leather, and livestock into the growing settlement. Sailors unloaded cargo from ships arriving along the River Thames, while craftsmen hammered iron and bronze inside workshops that echoed from dawn until sunset. Only 17 years earlier, Londinium had not even existed. Now it was becoming the economic heart of Roman Britain. Its location was perfect. The Thames allowed ships to reach the sea. Roads connected it to nearly every major settlement in the province. Every day brought new opportunities. New wealth. New settlers. To many Romans, Londinium represented the future. No one imagined that future was only days away from ending. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus rode almost without rest. His soldiers had marched farther and faster than most armies thought possible. Dust covered their armor. Many had slept only a few hours in several days. Yet they continued forward because every messenger carried worse news than the last. Camulodunum had fallen. The 9th Legion had been shattered. Entire districts lay in ruins. The rebellion was spreading. When Suetonius finally entered Londinium, he immediately understood the city's greatest weakness. It had grown too quickly. Unlike older Roman colonies, Londinium possessed no great defensive walls. Its prosperity had come faster than its protection. Warehouses lined the river. Markets filled open streets. Thousands of civilians crowded its neighborhoods. If Boudicca attacked, defending the city would be nearly impossible. The governor called a council of his senior officers. Maps were spread across wooden tables. Messengers arrived one after another, confirming what everyone already feared. Boudicca's army was growing larger every day. Some estimates now spoke of tens of thousands of warriors. Others claimed the number had surpassed 100,000. The exact figure mattered little. Rome simply did not possess enough soldiers in southeastern Britain to defend every settlement. Suetonius faced a terrible choice. Fight inside Londinium and risk losing his remaining army. Or abandon the city, saving the legions while sacrificing thousands of civilians. For any Roman commander, the decision was agonizing. For the empire, it was unavoidable. Suetonius chose the army. Without the legions, Britain would be lost completely. Orders spread quickly. Roman soldiers prepared to leave. Officials gathered what supplies they could carry. Anyone able to march was told to follow the army. But not everyone could leave. The elderly. The sick. Families unwilling to abandon everything they owned. Merchants convinced the danger would somehow pass. Many remained behind. Some believed Rome would return before the rebels arrived. Others simply refused to believe Londinium could fall. History would remember their decision with heartbreaking clarity. As the Roman columns disappeared along the road, silence settled over the city. It lasted only a few hours. Then, lookouts spotted movement beyond the horizon. At first came dust. Then banners. Then thousands upon thousands of warriors emerging across the surrounding countryside. The rebellion had arrived. Boudicca did not hesitate. Her army surged toward the undefended settlement like a flood breaking through a weakened dam. The first buildings caught fire before noon. Warehouses filled with timber, oil, and cloth erupted into towering flames. Strong winds carried burning embers from roof to roof. Within minutes, entire streets were burning. Smoke rolled across the Thames so thickly that daylight turned orange. The sound was unlike anything the city had ever known. Timbers cracking. Animals screaming. Children crying. Walls collapsing beneath the heat. Merchants desperately tried to rescue valuables before abandoning their homes. Many never escaped. Ancient historian Tacitus writes that Boudicca deliberately refused to spare the settlement. This was not simply a military objective. It was vengeance. Everything Rome had built upon British soil symbolized foreign domination. Temples. Government buildings. Trading houses. They were all consumed by fire. Archaeologists have uncovered a distinctive layer of burnt earth beneath parts of modern London dating to this very event. Even today, hidden beneath one of the world's largest cities lies physical evidence of that catastrophic day. The ashes remain. For hours, the flames spread without resistance. Unlike Roman armies, Boudicca's warriors were not interested in occupying the city. They intended to erase it. By nightfall, Londinium had become a sea of fire. Columns of smoke climbed high into the evening sky, visible for miles across the countryside. Travelers watching from distant hills later described the horizon glowing red long after sunset. One city had already fallen. Now Rome's greatest commercial center in Britain lay in ruins. Yet the rebellion was still not satisfied. Boudicca understood something few commanders appreciated. Momentum. Every victory inspired new recruits. Every Roman defeat weakened imperial authority. Stopping now would only allow the empire to recover. So the army marched again. Its next destination lay northwest. Another prosperous Roman settlement. Another symbol of imperial control. Verulamium. Modern St. Albans. Unlike Londinium, Verulamium had originally been a native settlement before becoming closely tied to Roman administration. Wide streets crossed neatly planned neighborhoods. Stone public buildings stood beside elegant homes. Roman law governed daily life. Trade flourished. Many local Britons had embraced Roman customs. To Boudicca's followers, that made the city no less Roman. Perhaps even worse. It represented those who had accepted foreign rule. When the rebel army appeared outside its limits, panic spread almost immediately. There would be no lengthy siege. No negotiations. Only destruction. The attack unfolded with terrifying speed. Buildings burned. Temples collapsed. Shops disappeared beneath smoke. Those unable to flee found themselves trapped. Ancient sources describe the destruction of Verulamium alongside Camulodunum and Londinium as nearly complete. Modern archaeology supports the existence of widespread fire damage dating to the revolt. 3 major Roman settlements gone. In only a matter of weeks. The psychological impact was enormous. For the first time since the conquest of Britain, many Romans openly questioned whether the province could be held at all. Across Britain, rumors spread faster than official reports. Some claimed Boudicca had already destroyed every Roman legion. Others insisted Emperor Nero was preparing to abandon the island entirely. Fear magnified every story. Reality became difficult to separate from exaggeration. Merchants fled south toward the coast. Some local tribes reconsidered their loyalty to Rome. Others waited cautiously, uncertain which side would ultimately prevail. The empire suddenly appeared vulnerable. And once people begin believing an empire can fall, its authority begins to weaken long before its armies are defeated. Meanwhile, Suetonius Paulinus continued gathering every soldier he could find. He recalled detachments from distant forts. Survivors of earlier battles joined his ranks. Veterans who had spent decades fighting across the empire prepared for one final confrontation. The governor understood there would be no reinforcements arriving from Rome in time. Everything depended on the forces already in Britain. Failure meant the loss of the province. Perhaps even his own execution. Success would require something close to a miracle. The Roman army remained heavily outnumbered. Historians estimate Suetonius may have commanded around 10,000 men. Boudicca likely possessed a far larger force, although the exact numbers remain uncertain. Whatever the true figures, the imbalance was unmistakable. One side possessed overwhelming numerical superiority. The other possessed the finest professional soldiers in the ancient world. Both commanders now searched for the perfect battlefield. Boudicca believed numbers would decide the coming fight. Suetonius believed discipline would. Only one of them could be right. As the Queen's army advanced, confidence surged through its ranks. 3 Roman cities had been destroyed. An entire legion had nearly ceased to exist. Thousands of warriors now believed the impossible was within reach. Some even imagined marching all the way to the sea, driving every Roman ship back across the channel. For the first time since the invasion of AD 43, Britain seemed capable of reclaiming its freedom. But victory can be as dangerous as defeat. Success often breeds overconfidence. And while Boudicca celebrated the greatest triumph of the rebellion, Suetonius was quietly choosing a battlefield where Roman discipline could overcome impossible odds. The fate of Roman Britain would soon be decided. Not in a city. Not behind walls. But on a narrow stretch of road where one army fought for an empire, and the other fought for its very existence. The final battle, the day Rome refused to fall. For weeks, Britain had belonged to Boudicca. Roman cities had burned. Veteran colonies had vanished beneath flames. Merchants had fled. Imperial officials had disappeared behind the walls of distant forts. Across the province, it seemed as though Rome's authority had simply dissolved. Every victory made the rebel army stronger. Every Roman defeat convinced more tribes to join the uprising. Some believed the empire had already lost Britain. Even Emperor Nero, according to later Roman accounts, reportedly considered whether abandoning the province altogether might become necessary if the situation continued to deteriorate. The greatest empire in the world had been pushed to the edge of disaster. But Suetonius Paulinus was not ready to surrender. The Roman governor understood one simple truth. He could not defeat Boudicca by matching her numbers. That was impossible. Instead, he would force her to fight his battle. Somewhere along the great Roman road later known as Waddling Street, Suetonius found exactly what he had been searching for. Although historians still debate the precise location, the ancient descriptions are remarkably consistent. A narrow position. A forest protecting the rear. Open ground stretching before the Roman line. Perfect. The terrain eliminated Boudicca's greatest advantage. Her numbers. Only a limited portion of her enormous army could attack at one time. The rest would be trapped behind their own warriors. For a commander who trusted discipline above all else, it was the ideal battlefield. The Roman army prepared carefully. Perhaps 10,000 men. Some historians suggest slightly fewer. Others slightly more. Whatever the exact figure, they faced an enemy several times their size. Legionaries inspected every piece of equipment. Helmet straps tightened. Sword edges sharpened. Pilum javelins stacked in neat rows. Centurions walked silently among their men. Many soldiers had survived campaigns in Germany, Dacia, Gaul, and Britannia. Yet few had ever faced odds like these. No one spoke much that morning. There was little left to say. Either Rome survived the day, or Roman Britain ceased to exist. Across the valley, Boudicca's army gathered. The sight must have been extraordinary. Ancient writers describe an immense sea of warriors stretching across the landscape. Brightly painted shields. Long spears. Swords raised toward the sky. War chariots racing before the lines. War horns echoed from every direction. Behind the warriors came something unusual. Thousands of families. Wagons formed a massive semicircle behind the army. Women. Children. Elders. They had come to witness what many believed would be the final victory over Rome. Some expected to celebrate before sunset. Others hoped to watch the empire disappear forever from Britain. It was an extraordinary display of confidence. But it also left very little room for retreat. Ancient historians preserve a speech attributed to Boudicca before the battle. Like many speeches recorded in ancient histories, it was almost certainly reconstructed rather than recorded word for word. Even so, it reflects how Roman writers believed she inspired her followers. Standing high in her war chariot, visible above the crowd, she reminded the tribes why they had taken up arms. She spoke of stolen land, of Roman greed, of broken promises, of her daughters, of freedom. She challenged her warriors to choose between life as free people, or slavery beneath Rome. A roar answered her words. Weapons struck shields. Thousands shouted together. For a moment, it seemed unstoppable. On the opposite side of the field, Suetonius addressed his soldiers. He did not promise an easy victory. He pointed toward the enormous army before them. Then toward the narrow ground protecting their flanks. Ignore their numbers. Trust your training. Hold the line. Throw your pila only when ordered. Fight together. The governor understood something every experienced Roman commander knew. Fear spreads quickly. Discipline spreads faster. The silence before battle felt endless. A cold wind moved through the valley. Dust drifted across the open ground. For several long moments neither army moved. Then, the British war horn sounded. Thousands surged forward. The earth itself seemed to shake beneath their feet. War chariots raced ahead, wheels bouncing across uneven ground. Spearmen followed. Then swordsmen. An enormous wave of humanity rushed toward the Roman line. To many observers, it must have looked unstoppable. Suetonius did not give the order immediately. The legionaries waited. Shields locked tightly together. The enemy drew closer. Closer. Still, they waited. Only when the front ranks reached deadly range did the command finally come. Throw. Thousands of pila left Roman hands at the same instant. The sky darkened. Heavy iron-tipped javelins crashed into the charging warriors. Unlike ordinary spears, Roman pila were designed to bend after impact, making enemy shields almost impossible to use. Men stumbled beneath the sudden weight. Others fell instantly. The front ranks collapsed into those behind them. Momentum vanished. Before the attackers could recover, a second volley followed. Again, the Roman missiles tore through the advancing mass. Confusion spread. The carefully timed attack had achieved exactly what Suetonius intended. Then came the command every legionary had been waiting for. Advance. The Roman line moved as one. Not running. Not shouting wildly. Simply advancing. Shield against shield. Sword held low. Every step deliberate. Every movement practiced through years of relentless training. Instead of spreading across the field, the Romans formed a wedge-shaped assault, concentrating their strength against the disorganized center of the British advance. The discipline was devastating. Where individual warriors fought with incredible courage, the legion fought like a single living machine. The fighting became desperate. British warriors struck with tremendous force. Many Roman shields splintered beneath heavy blows. Several legionaries fell where they stood. Yet every gap closed almost immediately. Fresh soldiers stepped forward. The formation never broke. As more and more warriors pressed into the narrow battlefield, they began trapping one another. Those behind continued pushing forward. Those ahead struggled simply to move. The very size of Boudicca's army became a burden. The battlefield that had seemed insignificant only hours earlier now worked entirely in Rome's favor. Then the Roman cavalry attacked. Hidden on both flanks until the decisive moment, mounted auxiliaries swept around the edges of the battlefield. The British line began collapsing inward. What had started as an organized assault slowly dissolved into chaos. Warriors attempted to retreat. Many found the way blocked. Behind them stood hundreds of wagons carrying their own families. Panic spread. Horses overturned carts. Oxen broke free. Children screamed. Smoke from overturned campfires drifted across the battlefield. The escape route disappeared beneath confusion. Ancient historians record catastrophic losses among Boudicca's followers. The figures they provide, claiming around 80,000 Britons killed compared to only 400 Roman soldiers, are almost certainly exaggerated, especially regarding Roman casualties. Modern historians treat these numbers with caution. However, there is broad agreement on the overall outcome. The Roman victory was decisive. The rebellion collapsed in a single day. What weeks of astonishing success had built, one battle destroyed. Boudicca escaped the battlefield. But only briefly. Ancient sources disagree about her final fate. Tacitus writes that she took poison rather than face capture. Cassius Dio also suggests she died soon after the defeat, though his account differs in several details. No confirmed grave has ever been found. No archaeological discovery has conclusively identified her final resting place. In death, as in life, she remains surrounded by mystery. When the battlefield finally fell silent, Suetonius walked among the survivors. The cost of victory was visible everywhere. Roman soldiers collapsed from exhaustion. Many searched desperately for missing friends. Broken weapons covered the ground. The rebellion that had nearly destroyed Roman Britain was over. Rome had survived. But nothing would ever be quite the same again. The governor understood that military victory alone would not secure Britain. The empire had learned a painful lesson. Fear could maintain control for a time. Justice maintained it far longer. The uprising had begun not because Rome was weak, but because Rome had forgotten the difference between ruling a province and humiliating a people. The battle was over. The war had ended. But the legacy of Boudicca was only beginning. The legacy of Boudicca, the queen who became immortal. The battlefield was silent. Only hours earlier, the valley had echoed with war horns, clashing steel, and the cries of tens of thousands of warriors. Now, the wind carried only smoke. Broken spears lay scattered across the ground. Abandoned shields rested where their owners had made a final stand. Roman surgeons moved among the wounded, doing everything they could to save exhausted legionaries who had just survived one of the greatest crises in the history of Roman Britain. Victory belonged to Rome. But no one celebrated. Every soldier understood how close the empire had come to losing the province forever. When Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus looked across the battlefield, he saw more than the end of a rebellion. He saw the consequences of Rome's own mistakes. The uprising had not begun because Britain possessed a powerful army. It had not begun because Rome lacked disciplined soldiers. It had begun because corruption, greed, and cruelty had turned loyal allies into desperate enemies. The public humiliation of Boudicca. The assault on her daughters. The confiscation of Iceni lands. The arrogance of imperial officials. Together, these actions had ignited a rebellion that nearly erased nearly 2 decades of Roman conquest. It was a lesson the empire could not afford to ignore. In the months that followed, Rome struck back with overwhelming force. Legions marched through the countryside searching for the remaining rebel groups. Villages believed to have supported the uprising were disarmed. Strategic forts were reinforced. Roads were expanded to allow armies to move more quickly across the province. The empire was determined to ensure that no rebellion of such scale could happen again. Yet something had changed. Roman policy became noticeably more cautious. Even Emperor Nero, far away in Rome, reportedly questioned whether Suetonius' harsh methods might provoke further unrest. Eventually, another governor was appointed, bringing a more measured approach to governing Britain. Rather than ruling through fear alone, Rome increasingly relied on diplomacy, local alliances, trade, and gradual integration. The empire had learned that military victory was only one part of conquest. Keeping the peace required something far more difficult. Trust. Across Britain, life slowly returned. The blackened ruins of Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium did not remain abandoned forever. Roman engineers and builders returned. Streets were rebuilt. New forums rose from the ashes. Stone replaced timber in many public buildings, making future settlements more resistant to fire. Bridges stretched once more across rivers. Markets reopened. Ships returned to the Thames. Within a generation, Londinium would once again become the commercial heart of Roman Britain. Remarkably, one of the greatest cities in the modern world grew directly from the ashes left behind by Boudicca's rebellion. History often destroys, before it rebuilds. The Roman occupation of Britain continued for more than 3 centuries after the revolt. New towns appeared across the island. Aqueducts, bathhouses, amphitheaters, villas, and temples reshaped the landscape. Latin became the language of administration. Roman law influenced local government. Trade connected Britain to every corner of the empire. Olive oil from Hispania. Wine from Gaul. Glass from the Rhineland. Luxury goods from the Mediterranean. The province that had once stood on the edge of the Roman world became deeply woven into its economy. Yet beneath this growing Roman identity, older traditions never completely disappeared. Celtic languages survived. Local customs endured. Ancient beliefs adapted rather than vanished. Britain became neither fully Roman nor entirely Celtic. It became something uniquely its own. And what of Boudicca? History becomes strangely quiet after her death. No royal tomb has ever been identified with certainty. No inscription records where she was buried. No statue was raised in her honor during Roman rule. For centuries, her name nearly disappeared from written history. It survived only because two Roman historians, Tacitus and Cassius Dio, chose to preserve the story of the woman who had almost driven Rome from Britain. Without them, the world might never have known her name. Centuries passed. The Roman Empire itself eventually collapsed in the West. Its legions withdrew from Britain in the early 5th century. The roads remained. The walls remained. Many cities remained. But Rome was gone. Ironically, the empire that defeated Boudicca proved far less permanent than many had imagined. Kingdoms rose where Roman governors once ruled. Languages changed. Religions changed. Entire civilizations appeared and disappeared. Yet the memory of one Celtic queen refused to fade. During the 19th century, Boudicca experienced an extraordinary revival. As Britain expanded into a global empire, many writers and artists looked back to ancient history in search of national heroes. They found one in the fearless Queen of the Iceni. Poems celebrated her courage. Paintings imagined her charging into battle in a great war chariot. Perhaps the most famous tribute still stands today near the Palace of Westminster in London. A magnificent bronze statue depicts Boudicca standing tall in her chariot, her daughters beside her, facing toward the city that once burned beneath her rebellion. Millions of people pass it every year. Many never realize they are looking at the woman who nearly changed the course of Roman history. Modern archaeology has transformed our understanding of the revolt. Excavations in Colchester, London, and St. Albans have uncovered thick layers of ash dating to around AD 60 to 61. Burned timbers. Collapsed buildings. Charred pottery. Melted glass. These discoveries match the ancient written accounts with remarkable accuracy. Elsewhere, archaeologists continue searching for clues that might reveal the location of the final battle. Several sites have been proposed. None has been confirmed. The landscape still guards its secret. Every new excavation brings fresh questions. Every discovery reminds us that history is never truly complete. Today, historians also view Boudicca with greater nuance than earlier generations. She was neither simply a victim nor merely a warrior. She was a political leader. A queen. A mother. A symbol of resistance. Her rebellion was born from profound injustice, yet it also unleashed immense destruction. Roman civilians, merchants, and families died alongside soldiers. Entire communities disappeared in the flames. Like so many figures in history, Boudicca cannot be understood through simple labels of hero or villain. She was a human being forced into extraordinary circumstances. And those circumstances changed history. Looking back nearly 2,000 years later, one question still echoes across the centuries. What if Suetonius had chosen to defend Londinium? What if the Roman line had broken at the final battle? What if Boudicca had won? Would Britain have remained outside the Roman world? Would London ever have become one of history's greatest cities? Would the Roman influence on Britain have ended before it had truly begun? No one can answer those questions with certainty. History followed only one path. But for a few extraordinary weeks in AD 60 to 61, that path hung by a thread. The story of Boudicca is not simply about Rome. It is about power. About dignity. About what happens when rulers mistake obedience for loyalty. The Roman Empire possessed the finest army of its age. It built roads across continents, raised cities from stone, connected millions of people under a single government. Yet one act of cruelty against a single family nearly unraveled everything it had built in Britain. Sometimes, history does not change because of vast armies. Sometimes, it changes because one person refuses to kneel. The forests that once echoed with the war cries of the Iceni have long since fallen silent. The ashes of Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium lie buried beneath modern streets. The Roman legions are gone. Their forts have become ruins. Their empire has passed into history. But the name Boudicca endures. Not because she defeated Rome. She did not. She is remembered because she dared to stand against the greatest empire on earth when almost no one else would. And that is why, nearly 2,000 years later, the warrior queen of Britain is still impossible to forget.